Welcome back, children, in our this session, and this is your assignment number 3 from chapter Respiratory System. Now today I am going to teach you about the respiratory system in human beings. Gases are exchanged across the surface in the lungs, which lie inside the thoracic cavity. Now children, this you all know that the exchange of gases, it takes place inside the lungs and which lies in the thoracic cavity. Now thoracic cavity is also known as chest cavity, and its function is that it gives protection to the internal organs, and it is itself protected by the rib cage. Now the upper respiratory tract is a tube from the nostrils and mouth to the lungs. It consists of the following organs. Now we see the organs which are connected in our respiratory tract. Now first one is the nose or the nasal passage. Air enters the nose through the nostrils. While passing through the nostrils, which are lined with hair, air is filtered. Now you all have seen that there are a few hair in your nose. Now these hair, they work as a filtrate. These hair, they work as a filtrate, and they traps all the bacteria and the dust particles that comes from the air, and it does not allow those bacteria and dust particles to enter in our body. So these hair, they work as a filtrate for our nose. Now the nasal passage brings the air to the body temperature before it enter the lungs and also moisten the air. The work of the function of the nasal passage is that it brings the air to the body temperature and before it enters to the lungs, as well as it moistens the air also. Now second one is pharynx. So this word is new for you. Pharynx. In pharynx, both food pipe and windpipe open. It is a common passage for food and air. Now I'll show you in the diagram the nasal passage and the pharynx. So this is the diagram of the human respiratory system. In this you can easily see that this is the left nostril through which the air passes to the left nasal passage. So in this way we have a left as well as the right nostrils, and through which the air passes to our nasal passage. Second, I'll show you pharynx. Pharynx, this pipe you can see here, this is known as pharynx, this pipe, and it is common between the food pipe and the windpipe, and it is common for the food pipe as well as for the windpipe, and it is a common passage for food as well as for air. So this one is nostrils and this one is pharynx. Now we see the third organ, that is larynx. At the upper region of the trachea is the larynx or the voice box. Now this larynx is also known as voice box because when we speak just because of this larynx. The larynx is lined by two pairs of vocal cords that stretch across it. The vocal cords vibrate to produce sound. This entire structure is visible externally as the Adam's apple. Now this larynx is also known as voice box, and when we speak, our vocal cords, they vibrate, they produce sound just because of this larynx only. And this whole entire process, this whole entire structure is also known as Adam's apple. You can see in the diagram that this part is known as larynx or the voice box, and in this voice box the vocal cords stretch across the floor of the larynx and vibrate as the air passes between them. So this part of the food pipe is known as the larynx or the voice box. Now the next organ is trachea or the windpipe. The nasal passage leads to the back of the mouth, and this is where the trachea or windpipe begins. You can see in the diagram. Here you can see the trachea, and it is divided into two parts, the left and the right bronchi. The opening of trachea is called glottis and is guarded by epiglottis. Now this opening of the trachea, it is known as the glottis. You can see here that this part, the opening of the trachea part, is divided into, as I told you, it is divided into two parts, left and right bronchi, and this opening of the trachea, of the windpipe, is known as glottis. You can see, and here you can see the vocal cords also, which are present in the larynx, and which is responsible for our voice. When the air passes between them, they vibrate and they produce sound. Now you have seen glottis, you have seen vocal cords. Now we come to epiglottis. As I have read that the opening of trachea is called glottis and it is guarded by epiglottis. Now I'll show you the epiglottis. Here you can see this part is known as epiglottis, and it prevents the food from entering the larynx. The function of this epiglottis is that it prevents food, that it does not enter into the larynx. Now during the swallowing of food, the epiglottis closes the glottis and prevents the food from entering the larynx or the windpipe. The lower portion of the trachea divided into two branches called bronchi, as I'll show you in the diagram, that the trachea divided into two parts, that is left bronchi and the right bronchi, which enter the lungs in the thoracic cavity. Now we see the next organ, that is bronchi and bronchioles. Now the trachea divides into two short arms, each called a bronchus. Each bronchus enter a lung. Inside the lung, each bronchus divide into fine tubes called bronchioles. Now I'll show you the diagram. Here you can see the diagram of bronchioles, and these are very tiny vessels. You can see here. When the blood enters, there is a supply of blood from here. You can see from pulmonary artery, and these minute vessels, they are known as alveolus. Here you can see the blood vessels, these tiny blood vessels, they are known as capillaries. So this bronchioles, the air enters through this bronchioles and then it reaches to the lungs. Now we see the next part, that is the lungs. The lungs are moist, bright pink, unevenly lobed structures. Now three main lobes in the right and two in the left. Each lung has a number of air sacs called alveoli. These are the functional unit of lungs. Now the walls of air sacs are thin and elastic. Alveoli are covered with network of capillaries for rich blood supply, as I have shown you in the diagram, that it is connected, it is totally covered with the network of capillaries, and just because of there is a rich blood supply. Now oxygen diffuses through capillaries from the air sacs and combines with the hemoglobin of the RBCs present in the blood. Now here the oxygen diffuses through capillaries and the air sacs, it combines with hemoglobin of the RBCs. RBCs are red blood cells that is present in our blood. Now at the same time there is diffusion of carbon dioxide which comes from various tissues. Now during this process there is the diffusion of carbon dioxide also takes place, which comes from the different tissues. Now I wanted to discuss this whole diagram with you. As I I've shown you the nostrils over here. Now there are left and as well as the right nostrils, and their function is that the air passes through these nostrils to the nasal cavity, to the nasal passage. Then palate is to separate the nasal passage from the mouth. Here you can see that this diagram is known as, this part is known as palate, and its function is that it separates the nasal passage from the mouth. Here you can see the mouth, and here is the nasal passage, and it separates both of them. Now the glottis, as I told you, that it is an opening to the larynx, and the size is altered by the muscles of the larynx. This size of the glottis, it differs, it alters with the size of the muscles. Then come to the vocal cords. When air passes between them, they vibrate and produce sound. As I told you that these vocal cords, they are present in the larynx, and when the air passes through these vocal cords, they vibrate and they produce sound, and because of this only we can able to speak. Then incomplete rings of cartilage support the trachea and bronchi. You can see here few rings are there. Now these are the rings which are made up of cartilage bone, and it gives support to the trachea as well as to the bronchi. Now thoracic cavity, in which the lungs lie and protected by the ribs. Now as I told you that this thoracic cavity is also known as chest cavity, and its function is that it gives protection to the internal organs. Now the trachea, as I told you, that it is divided into two parts. One is left bronchi and the second one is right bronchi. Here you can see the right lung and the left lung. Then this middle part is known as the heart. Then diaphragm is a sheet of muscles that forms the base of the thoracic cavity. You can see here that this is the sheet of the muscles, and it makes the base with the thoracic cavity. The next is pharynx. Pharynx, as I told you, that it is the common passage for food or air. Then epiglottis, it prevents food from entering the larynx. Function of epiglottis is that it prevents the food, it does not enter into the larynx. Then esophagus is known as the food pipe. Then larynx is also known as voice box, and the vocal cords, they stretch across the floor of the larynx and vibrate as air passes between them. Now ribs, you can see here there's these bony structures known as ribs. Then intercostal muscles between the ribs are there. Then the left bronchus passes to the left lungs. Then pleural membranes are there, as well as in those pleural membranes there is a fluid named pleural fluid. Then you can see here the small veins are there. These veins are known as bronchioles, and as I have shown you in the diagram also, that these tiny vessels, they are known as bronchioles. And the alveoli, these parts are known as alveoli. So here is the diagram of the human respiratory system. Now we come to the next topic, that is gas exchange. Now the lungs take oxygen from the air we breathe. This we all know, that the lungs, they get the oxygen from the air in which we breathe. They also excrete carbon dioxide into the air, which is produced during respiration. And children, while we breathe, we take in oxygen and we give out carbon dioxide, and this also we give in the atmosphere. These processes are called gaseous exchange. Now this entering and releasing of gases is known as gaseous exchange. When we breathe, air is drawn into our lungs through a system of tubes called the air passages. When we breathe oxygen from the atmosphere, the air, it enters into our lungs through a system of tubes, and those tubes, they are known as air passages. They end in millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli, and from there they goes to the tiny air sacs, and those air sacs are known as alveoli, or singly it is known as alveolus. Now that's all for this session. Soon I upload the next video for you all. Till then, thank you.